Hey everybody, Paul Angelo here, and welcome to another amazing video about gay sexuality. This video should be one of the top videos that you watch because I'm gonna share with you ideas that will help you expand your range of possibilities for love by at least 80%. Because a lot of people fall into the trap of top and bottom compatibility. We're gonna talk about the solution to the mismatch between top and bottom. So two bottoms or two tops, is that possible? And should you let go of search for that perfect, compatible, sexually compatible lover? So we're not talking about compatible lover in this whole thing. We're talking about sexually compatible. So most people look for sexual compatibility, not the full compatibility. So that's why this can get really, really complex. And people that keep searching for that are the same people that keep logging into Grindr year after year after year. Now, I've been in a relationship with an amazing man in love for 9 years at the cost of not having that sexual compatibility up front and still struggling with that. But I would rather have a lover be in love, taste intimacy, adventure across the span of long time than keep logging back to Grindr year after year after year and regressing and meeting people I should never be meeting. What are we talking about here? We're talking about sexual development, psychological development, development of the human psychic. Now, in this situation, sexual development. The main theme here is that when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 40, at each different timeline of your life, your sexuality and expression of your sexuality should be different. Sexual development has its peaks and valleys, okay? So in your 20s, you need to go get the sex out of your system because otherwise you're not going to be able to settle down into a healthy, stable relationship. Sexual cravings are going to take you out of stability, are going to make you feel out of control, and you're going to be looking at other men through the lens of that sexual craving as opposed to through the lens of looking for authentic, long-term, stable marriages. These are totally two different perspectives. So throughout your life, you're going to be experimenting sexually. In your 20s, all kinds of crazy stuff. Then in the 30s, supposed to be quieting down. And in the 40s, marriage, okay? Marriage. But for some people, sexual development is not completed, okay? So this is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of our discussion here. The reason why for some men, the whole thing about top and bottom is so difficult to comprehend is because they have not had the sexual exploration. For whatever reason, body image issues, shame, or judgments about sex, or religious background, or parental influences. For whatever reason, they're frozen in their sexual development. And because they're frozen in sexual development, those energies are not let out of the body, and they have tunnel vision into sexual specificity. Tunnel vision, like horses, kind of like blinded, and they only go one direction. They cannot see anywhere else. To them, when sexual development is not completed, that person's identity, it's like, imagine two circles, they are overlapping. Relationship and sex becomes one thing, not separate thing. Sex and relationships and relatedness, these are separate things. But for someone who's never had sexual completion fulfilled, it becomes one thing. When you ask the person, what's the most important thing in relationships, they're going to say sex. They don't conceive the possibility that something else is the center of relationships, which is trust. Trust, right? Trust, intimacy, healthy, authentic communication. Sex is secondary. And the older you get, the longer you are in a relationship, sex goes down the second, third, fourth place. There were moments in my relationship with Frank where we haven't had sex for months, like 6 months, a year. And it's not because there's something wrong, it's because when you are getting to know someone, there's so many other things that are showing up that you don't even think about sex. Now, some people, now I'm giving you some statements here that are showing up a little bit later in a relationship. You know, when you ascend in your personal development, when you become more self-actualized, when you work all the time, when you have a purpose, when you have vision, sex is so far out there, you don't even think about it. Yeah, you're jerking off, I'm jerking off all the time, yes, but I don't think about entering into my relationship with Frank or with anyone else through the main theme of sexual compatibility. It doesn't even appear on the horizon at all. I mean, that's how far the distance is from people that are sexually underdeveloped, where they crave sex so much they can't think about anything else, and they look at your crotch before they look at your face, versus the men that have self-actualized. They have explored sex from so many different directions in their 20s and early 30s. They look at you in your face and they want to get to know your brain and your character. That's the distance between those two men is so vast that this is why you see such a discrepancy between men that talk about sexual compatibility, that are basically infants on the inside, and men who have self-actualized, who are changing the world, who are leaders, who have a vision for life, and they're not distracted by sexuality anymore. So it's about human development. Sex, when it's underdeveloped, when the person does not have any sex, when their body is not touched by others across a span of, say, a decade, then they're gonna look at sex as the center of everything. Now, there's some men that have a lot of sex and still do that because they never connected emotion. So the key to sexual development is plugging in emotion into sexual practices. If you don't do that, sex becomes this static, standalone behavior that does not expand your awareness to become aware how you're emotionally growing through sexual activities. And if 1 year after another, there's no emotion inside of sexual behavior, the person's development is stuck. Because emotion is the energy that makes development of a human being into a forward momentum, into a forward direction. You see the same thing in business. You see the same thing with personal health. In personal development, when I have a client and I see that client is emotionally unavailable, basically, that person does not feel life, they're all about logic, it's going to be very difficult to get that person to transform. And usually at that moment you have to use different methods, styles of coaching, like more confrontation coaching, more kind of like in their face. You have to upset them, you have to confront them, you actually have to piss them off to create that spark, that heartbeat that freaks them out because they're emotionally so detached from themselves. And so in sexuality is the same thing. If a person is detached emotionally from their body, how they feel about a person with whom they're having sex, and if they continually have that anonymous sex over and over and over without an emotion or without sensing the emotion, then what will happen is that person will pass through many, many years of that person's life and never do any progress, never set the development of their sexual energies and their persona forward. And so they're gonna still want to crave the same sex act at 20, at 30, at 40, they're basically gonna be looking to get fucked at the age of 55. And I think there's really something wrong with that. When someone at the age of 55 is still looking to get fucked on Grindr, there is something fundamentally wrong with that person's life plan, if you know where I'm going with this, okay? So at different decades of our lives, we're supposed to be looking at different kinds of expression of sexuality and the ways that we connect to relationships. So sexual development, unfinished business, unfinished human development is what creates that desire for that specific sexual need to be met. Nothing else matters. So, all right, so enough about that. Let's move on to the next part. How do you actually make it work with someone where at the beginning you suspect there might not be a sexual compatibility? And this is what I've done with Frank. And I am so grateful for that, because the situations with Frank, our sexual complexities actually taught me a lot about sex, about relationships, about love. I really quickly learned that most of the things that we are taught by other friends and LGBT people, it's just a whole bunch of regressive ideas that are very primitive. They're very primitive. Human relationships exist on the higher level, on the higher dimension. And if sex is going to be occupying people's minds, they will never reach that higher dimension. And those people that claim they can have this kundalini energy of this ecstasy, they're joking. very few people actually can ascend into a level of spiritual sexual experience that is magical, like a psychedelic experience. Very few, 1 out of 10,000. So to say that through sex people are going to achieve nirvana is simply escapism from the real way to achieve nirvana with another person is through total, brutal honesty and emotional connection, okay? And I have had that nirvana with Frank across many years, so I can relate to that very well. It's not sex, it's through emotion and the brutal, authentic, radical, brutal honesty with another human being where you cry together, basically. That's what creates nirvana and that ecstasy of human connections. So at the beginning, when you see that you're not compatible with someone, the most important thing is to never talk about it. For the first, say, 30 days that you know someone, stay away from the sexual innuendos. Don't talk about sex. Don't mention it. Don't ask. And when that person wants to find out who you are sexually, top or bottom, just simply say, you know what, I really want to get to know you on an emotional level. Can we delay the conversation about sex until we get to know each other on an emotional level? Now, sometimes you will find out that the person is not ready. That person might not be sexually completed and finished, so to them, they're not going to want to do that. So unfortunately, in that situation, there's not much you can do. They are so tunnel visioned in terms of sex that you cannot satisfy them. And now, in my situation with Frank, when I delayed sex with him for 30 days, we never talked about sex. We cuddled, we kissed, and he's beautiful, he found me beautiful, all of that. So we connected, and we never talked about the mechanics of sex. And that's how we established a connection. So for the first 30 days, and by the way, this is why people should avoid sex for the first 30 to 60 days. Because then the whole sexual compatibility thing will kick in. It will people that are not real about relationships, they're gonna try to figure out, are you gonna fuck me? Am I gonna fuck you? And all that stuff, it's childishness. So you wanna delay that, and by delaying that, you're actually finding out if the guy is relationship ready. If he's not relationship ready, he will want to sidetrack the conversations into sex, and he will rationalize it. He will invent reasons why he needs to have that. And you're gonna know, okay, this man is not ready for relationships. He's simply not ready. And by the way, if you're an older person looking for younger men, most younger men are gonna be not ready. Okay, most, not all, but most, because they're gonna need that craving of that all kinds of variety of sex. So if you're older guy chasing younger guys, you're gonna corner yourself into that sexual innuendo as opposed to relatedness. And it's very unlikely with that person you will ever go into the higher level of that ecstasy or nirvana. So let's come back to the first 30 to 60 days of relationship. Avoid conversation about sex, connect. Do all kinds of interesting things together. Go on a trip, go exercising. You can look at each other, half naked. Yes, that's showing off some skin to establish basic template of attraction that's mutual based on just an appearance of the body. That's good to have. We're talking here about the mechanics. The mechanics does not have to match. And as long as you establish that initial connection up front, then you can just have a conversation and say the following. I'm beginning to fall in love with you, and I'm scared that we might not be sexually compatible. I want to be honest with you that I am scared to tell you my sexual preferences because I found that every time I did that, the person would abandon me, would leave me. And so I would love to have a conversation with you about sexual complexities, about sexual behaviors, how I can connect with you. And I just want to tell you that no matter where you come from, I'm willing to satisfy you. I will help you feel sexually satisfied. I just want to share this with you because I care about you. You're a wonderful person. I really see myself falling in love with you. And if it's okay with you, if you can open your heart and mind to what I'm saying with you, I would like to take you to dinner. I'd like to legitimize ourselves as boyfriends, and I'd like to commit myself to work things out with you sexually. Is that something that we can work out? Do you believe that we can continue? And so when you say something like that, the person looks at you and they're actually gonna melt. They're gonna melt. their heart is going to open up, because everybody knows that the sexual complexity is such an obstacle. Everybody knows that. To the degree that you're going to express your statement of possible suffering and struggle, the other person is going to relate to that, and that's going to establish the connection. And then you will be able to have the space to resolve the sexual environment. And I believe when you have that sexual compatibility up front, it kind of like takes away the beautiful work that when you do that work, it can make you into a very strong couple. Like really, if the two people are willing to do this work right up front in the first, say, 90 days of knowing each other, what does that mean? It means you're good to go for marriage. It means that you are doing the hard work up front. And so that's why when you have the absence of sexual compatibility, when you actually have to do the work, it's a good thing, because you're flexing your muscles of emotional intelligence, sexual intelligence, communication, and the connection can be really powerful. So it's just a question of your openness to holding on or withholding your sexual innuendos for the first 30 to 60 days, okay? And be able to neutralize them if the person wants to force the sexual communication. Neutralize it, get a sense for how intense the other person's intention for sexual specificity is. If it's too intense, unfortunately, it's unlikely you can make it work. But if it's kind of in between, if you see the signs that this person can be flexible, then say what I said a moment ago or something like that, and try to connect on a heart-to-heart level, and then see if you can work things out. Because relationships is about intimacy. And if you start out with that, it can be like a beautiful flower. It can grow for the rest of your life, and you can actually teach each other how you can work things out. If you can solve the sexual issues up front, you will be able to solve anything. And obviously, it takes a lot more effort than this. It takes more education to solve other areas of relationships. But I hope that in this video and through this conversation, I helped you see that you can make relationships work with someone who is either two tops or two bottoms. It's, don't corner yourself into that irrational, very childish, funnel vision, because your ranges of partners will be very narrow, and you're going to be 55 years old still looking on Grindr to get fucked, okay? And instead of that, you can have a beautiful relationship, yes, with some sexual challenges, but you can flex your sexual intelligence, you can flex your emotional intelligence, and you can see that the pleasure from that is 10 times, 100 times, in my opinion, million times more important or more intense than the pleasure from just a few hours of sex with someone that later you'll struggle to connect emotionally because that person only wants to have your genitals. I mean, that's when you really think about it, how that works for people, you can see that it's a trap. And it's unfortunate that so many gay men have an identity that has overlapped relatedness, and they struggle for years, and they actually believe that that's the right way. And they believe that because we don't have the right leadership in the gay world, we don't have the psychologists, the counselors having the right kind of messages, promoting emotional connections first and always, and then everything else. Just because we are men does not mean we are not human. Human beings need emotion. And for your personal development as a man outside of sex, in your real world out there, emotion is what's going to help you find your passion. Emotion is what's going to help you find your purpose. Emotion is going to help you move from your childishness into your adulthood. Many gay men don't have the rite of passage. Gay men don't have children. Gay men don't have women to confront them about their lack of emotional availability. So gay men are kind of like lone wolf, free agents that are never confronted by anything. And so we really need to be very careful because if we're not confronted by all these places of rite of passage, of test, of confrontation with the reality of the world, then we're gonna end up looking to get fucked at 70. And I don't want to have that life. And fortunately, I grew out of that space long time ago, and I had to have an accident. I had to have a gun pointed to my face to kind of stop playing games with sex, to stop playing games with relationships, and that's what it did for me. So hopefully you don't have to have a gun pointed to your face. You don't have to have a very severe level of trauma, like becoming HIV positive or having some real serious bad things happen to you to kind of wake up from all those games that we are playing in the gay world, because we don't have the right people out there telling us to stop this, do that. Stop this, do that. Stop focusing on sex, focus on emotion, focus on connectedness and relatedness, and your life will be beautiful. Gay men have so much opportunity to have such extraordinarily fulfilling lives, but they get cornered in and they get stuck in sex. So I hope that in this video, you come unstuck, you go out there, you find your lover, and you communicate with him how much you love him and how much struggle it is to incorporate sexuality in the relationship. Be open about it, be honest about it. Yes, it sucks. It's gonna be a struggle, but to the degree that you're gonna be open about it, you're gonna communicate about it, he's gonna look at you and he's gonna start crying, his heart will open up, and you're gonna establish a connection that will last a lifetime. That's what I've done with Frank, and that's what I'm teaching you here to do with your next relationship. So best of luck, good luck with that. For more videos like these, please visit my blog at paulangelo.com. And those of you who are ready for a real transformation of your relationships, if you want to meet men in the most beautiful way, then visit